Welcome to today's horror ghost stories. Monroe City Monster. During my 31 years, I have seen plenty of strange things and had plenty of terrifying experiences. However, only one has continued to keep me awake some nights. It was in the early 2000s, and I, call me John, was just a boy back then. I was visiting my cousin who was a few years older than me. He lived on the outskirts of Monroe City, Indiana. We will call him Alex. Alex lived near a stretch of forest, and we loved to explore it from time to time. This visit started like any other. We played games and stuff inside for a few hours before deciding to go outside. We decided to go into the woods and build a fort. We were both incredibly excited and set off.
It took us about 10 minutes to get to the woods.
We went roughly 20 feet in before Alex looked at me and asked. The bird stopped. I looked up at him and nodded.
Maybe they flew away, I said, not understanding what the quiet could mean. Alex shrugged and continued to lead us deeper into the woods as we looked for a perfect spot for our fort.
20 minutes later, we found a small clearing and set to work. We grabbed sticks, logs, and a tarp we found. We worked on it for some time before we started to get bored, as kids do.
I looked at Alex. Let's play hide and seek. I don't know, John, he said with a hint of concern. It's getting kind of late. Come on, Alex, please, I pleaded.
He relented and said I could hide first. He went up to a tree and faced it as he covered his eyes.
You have 50 seconds, John,
he said before he started counting.
I took off to find a good spot to hide.
As I searched, I came upon another clearing. The trees surrounded it in a way that their branches formed a kind of roof. The branches made the clearing a bit darker than the rest of the forest. I moved into the clearing and was hit with a terrible smell. I looked around the clearing.
I realized how strange the clearing was.
To my left, there was a deep ditch-like divot in the ground. To my front was a strange mound of mud with a flattened top.
As I took a few steps forward, I realized there was a dead bird sitting on top of the mound.
Blood and feathers laid strewn around it. I thought it was weird, but curiosity kept me moving forward.
As I got closer to the ditch, I felt something hit me in the back. I screamed and spun around.
It was Alex. He laughed hard and said, "Found you!" I gave him a small shove and laughed with him. He looked around, and his face became a mix of curiosity and concern. "What the hell?"
Alex asked as he saw the bird. "John, what did you stumble on?" he asked. I didn't answer.
I was now looking into the ditch and began to shake. Inside the ditch were bones and decomposing bodies of different animals, most small like squirrels and rabbit, but there were a couple of deer. There was something that looked as if it could have been a dog.
Alex walked up beside me and gasped.
While we looked into the ditch, we noticed other things like knickknacks and various other items. Alex pointed a shaking finger at one particular item. It was his Game Boy that had gone missing a week prior. We started noticing other toys and things that belonged to him and his sister. We looked at each other and began to back away from the ditch.
"We should go, John. This is scary," Alex said. Yeah, I stammered.
As we backed up, we heard branches snap and shake up in the trees to our right. We screamed and looked up.
On one of the branches, there was this creature staring at us.
It had large eyes that took up a large portion of its face. Dark, leathery-looking skin covered its face.
It just stared at us. It didn't move, and neither did we.
Alex and I were filled with terror at first, but then a sense of calm came over us.
It felt like we weren't in danger.
The creature slowly backed up the branch and then turned, before climbing further up the tree.
Alex and I got a good look at it then.
It was roughly my size, 4'2", and skinny. On its back looked like folded wings.
As soon as it was out of view, we ran.
We ran as fast as we could until we reached his house. We stormed through the door all the way to his room.
As we breathed heavily, we just looked at each other.
We couldn't form words and couldn't explain to his parents what happened. We sat and tried to focus on dinner, but we were too scared to eat.
Later, my mum came to pick me up.
I said my goodbyes to Alex and his parents. Alex and I sharing a look that meant to stay quiet about what we saw.
I'm not sure why we didn't want to tell our parents, but we didn't.
As my mom and I pulled out onto the country road, I looked out the window into a group of trees and I nearly screamed. In the upper branches of a tree, I saw a large pair of glowing yellow eyes watching the car as we drove away. I lost contact with Alex, but we never spoke of that day. I wonder if he still remembers it as vividly as I do. Maybe someday we will talk about it again. But I don't ever see myself returning to Monroe City. If you ever visit, stay out of the woods. Something makes its home there. Next story, I don't think it was a coyote. Hi Darkness, long-time subscriber and listener, but a first-time poster. This is a story my father told me about a time when he was hunting and had a strange encounter of the creature kind. My father and I do not really talk anymore, as he has let substance abuse get the best of him over the years. But when I was a kid, he was a pretty good dad. We always went hunting or fishing, or sometimes both, multiple times a month when the seasons were in. But I always noticed there was a certain part of the woods he usually would try to avoid unless he was desperate to bring home a deer or a turkey for one of the big cookouts we would have. Now, for context, both I and my father grew up in the Smoky Mountains in East Tennessee, in a little town, ABT 30 miles from Knoxville. And I'll be telling this story through his own words, and I'll try to be as detailed and accurate as possible, as he only ever told
Me a couple times because he didn't like talking.
about it that much. He said, I can feel it somehow whenever I mention it. Anyways, here we go. It was just like any other day. I chose to go hunting. I pulled on my overalls and my camo, packed some food and a little bit of camping supplies, a map of my area and my rifle, hopped in my truck and started off ABT 3 a.m. that morning. After a couple hours of driving and looking for a good spot to park my truck, I got out, breathed in the cold morning air, grabbed my supplies and started off into the woods. It was peaceful and quiet. The bugs and crickets were chirping and singing, and I could hear the small animals rustling and running through the undergrowth. After ABT 30 or 45 minutes of walking, I came to what I thought was a good spot to set up my blind in a small little circle of bushes right next to a small stream ABT 20 feet away. I got everything set up, pulled on my extra coat I had brought, and climbed inside the blind and sat, watched and listened. It was tranquil, with the stream babbling and the small critters running around me. I felt right at home. After a couple hours of watching and patiently waiting and letting a few less desirable spikes go on with their morning foraging,
I saw it, a big, beautiful buck with a good set of antlers right by the stream getting a drink. I quietly raised my rifle and took aim. The sound of the rifle rang out, and the deer fell.
I could already smell the delicious stew cooking.
I exited my blind, walked over, and thanked
The deer for its sacrifice and the energy it would give me and my family, as that's what I was
always taught to do. I began processing my kill, and
dressing it as quickly as I could,
as it was ABT 8 a.m. or so at this point, and I was starting to,
feeling the cold air bite through my clothes,
and I wanted to get home and
get the deer stored properly as quickly as I could. After ABT 15 or 20 minutes or so, I packed up my processed deer and buried the guts nearby. I returned to my blind and proceeded to gather all my essentials, although it did occur to me that I'd have to make 2 trips for all my things. I did not mind this, as I had gotten a substantial reward, and plus the woods were beautiful, so it gave me an excuse to walk through them again before I left. After walking for some time and getting turned around a bit, I made it back to my truck and put the deer in the bed, rested for a minute, and started off again to gather the rest of my supplies. It was on this second trip. Through the woods, that I did notice it was a bit quiet, completely silent. I continued on and eventually came up on my blind again and started packing things up. That's when it hit me. In this part of the woods, it was completely silent, all except for the stream, which seems louder now, and a noise, a choking, gulping noise. That's when I looked up and down near the stream, just a few yards away from where I'd shot the deer. Where I had buried its entrails was a coyote, except this coyote was at the size of a doe, and not small and skittish like a regular-sized coyote would be. It was the biggest coyote I'd ever seen, and it was hastily digging and gnawing at the ground, where I buried the buck's insides. Then it stopped and looked up at me, staring at it, and it stared right back. I realized all too late that I had left my rifle back at the truck, but I didn't move. We both just stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. Its whole face and muzzle was covered in dirt and blood from digging and getting at the leftovers from my buck. I didn't know what to do, so I just stayed still as possible. That was until it started slowly moving towards me, still keeping eye contact with me.
I bolted immediately and didn't look back, but I could hear it running.
Making a gagging, yipping noise, I was full on sprinting, hopping to not trip or fall.
Hoping to just make it to my truck, and finally I seen it. My big, beautiful, rusted red Ford sitting right where I'd parked it on the side of the little dirt road.
I ran and practically crashed through my driver's side door, which I had thankfully forgotten to lock after dropping the deer off before venturing back into the woods. I slammed the door and locked it, started my truck, and before I pulled off, I noticed it. Right there, just outside of the tree line, 10 to 12 yards away. That massive deer-sized coyote just staring at me. I squealed out of there, leaving my blind and the rest of my supplies behind. I drove like a madman home, still reeling from what happened, still wondering if maybe I'd just scared myself or just imagined it. To be honest, I don't know, but after that I bought myself a .44 sidearm for whenever I ventured back into the woods.
I had nightmares about that thing for a few days after that, but eventually they went away. But still, after all these years, sometimes my mind goes
back to that place by the stream, wondering if maybe I disturbed something else and that was the form it took, or maybe it
really was a massive coyote that I'd seen.
I'm not sure. All I know is I'll never forget what I saw that day. I'll always remember it till the day I pass on next story. A weird migraine. A real story that happened to me. I've been listening to your channel for a year now.
And I always love hearing the real stories from others.
So many times they give me goosebumps, and it's become my ritual before going to bed. A bit of background about me. I'm a French Canadian from Quebec, living in a small town along the lower St. Lawrence River. I'm a dad of 3 kids, with a wife, a normal job, and a pretty quiet life. I can't lie, I had a hard past and was very neglected by my parents when I was young. There were lots of alcohol-fueled disputes and all the chaos of a dysfunctional family. So, mental health problems and drugs were issues for me in my early 20s. I'm now 33. But with an iron will and a good life, I've come through it. When this event happened, my mental health was solid and I hadn't touched drugs in a while. So maybe that event came from my PTSD, or maybe it was supernatural, or maybe it was a very weird dream. But the dream explanation seems very unlikely to me, because I've never had dreams like that in my entire life.
Let's start the story. Since I was a child, I've had a very long history of migraines and headaches.
I remember migraines starting at 6 years old. When I have a migraine attack, it can last 24 hours sometimes, like having a knife permanently stuck in my head, and there's nothing I can do to cure it.
Even Advil or Tylenol doesn't work sometimes.
But migraines like that aren't common in my story. They happen very rarely, maybe 1 or 2 times max. Since I was a child, I've never hallucinated or had weird dreams during a migraine, even when my mental health wasn't great.
I never experienced hallucinations.
The only hallucinations I've ever had were when I was doing drugs at 20, so I don't think drugs were the cause of this event. One day, in September 2023, one of those migraines hit really hard.
It started at 7:00 p.m, so I told my wife I was going to bed.
I closed all the lights and sounds because my head hurt like my skull was splitting. Surprisingly, I fell asleep very fast, but the worst of the migraine hadn't even started yet. I woke up at 2 a.m, my wife was sleeping beside me, and the pain in my head at that moment was indescribable. So, I decided to get up, take an Advil, even though I knew from past migraines that it didn't work well, grab a bag of ice, and lie down on the couch. I told myself, if the headache doesn't ease up after this,
I'll go to the emergency room. I closed my eyes, and that's when things got very confusing. When I opened my eyes,
I was in my room, but I'd been on the couch upstairs when I closed them. My wife was sleeping in the same position she'd been in when I went upstairs for the meds. At that time, my youngest child was 6 months old, and his bassinet was in the same room as us. But the bassinet wasn't there.
I thought to myself, what the hell? This can't be real. I must be dreaming or something. So I went upstairs and saw myself sleeping on the couch.
At that moment, I knew something really weird was happening to me. Then I heard something downstairs. It was very dark, but I could still see.
I went downstairs to my room, where my wife was still sleeping, but where the baby's bassinet should have been. There was an open door instead. I heard a woman scream, "Shut that door!"
"You're making too much noise." And she slammed the door very hard from far away. I'm a very curious person in general. I question everything. And I couldn't rationalize why the bassinet was now a door. So I did what any curious person would do. I opened the door and went in. The door led me outside my house. It was the same yard as normal, but very dark with a thick fog. It sounds generic, but it was just like in the Insidious movie. The yard light was still on, but the light was dimmer than normal and the fog was thick. I was very confused by this kind of experience. Looking around the yard, I saw some transparent, dark purple silhouettes. Each one was alone, about 10 feet apart from the others, and they weren't moving. The feeling I got when I saw them was that these people seemed very
sad. I approached one of those weird silhouettes.
And even before I could open my mouth to ask where I was,
it started screaming at me, "Get out of me! Get out! Get out!"
So I backed up, and it just continued standing there, alone and unmoving.
I was more scared of myself than of it.
I walked around my house, and those silhouettes were everywhere in the yard and driveway, not moving in the thick fog. When I made a complete loop around the house, I saw a girl, a young girl, maybe 14 or 15 years old. She had a red polar fleece, jeans, and she was very colourful compared to the other silhouettes I'd seen. So I approached her, hoping to talk and ask what this place was and who these people around my house were. I said, "Hello, young girl." She didn't respond. So I asked, "Can you tell me who these people are?" She didn't respond.
I asked, "Are these people dead?"
Finally, she responded, "Yes, those people are dead.
And I'm here to warn you."
I opened my eyes and I was back on the couch lying down. I sat up, it was 3 a.m, I looked outside, everything was normal. Then I went downstairs to my room, everything was normal. My wife was still sleeping, my baby was sleeping in his bassinet, and my 2 other kids were sleeping in their beds. My headache was still there, but much less intense than before I fell asleep. I told my wife about the event. She thinks it's something supernatural because she believes in that kind of stuff, and she mentioned astral projection. I've heard about the subject in the past, but I've never really believed in that kind of esoteric practice, and I've never even tried it. But even today, I don't know what to think about it. I'm Christian, I read the Bible, and the Bible is very clear about that kind of magic. Don't get tainted by it. So I've never searched more about it, and continue to keep my faith in Jesus. That's my story. Next story, a lifetime of unseen presences. Hello Darkness prevails. I've been a long-time listener to your channel.
And after hearing so many incredible stories,
I finally decided to submit a few of my own true paranormal experiences. I have many more, but I figured I'd start with these to see how it goes, mashing them up into one big story for you today. I'm no storyteller by any means, and I've never done a submission like this before, so please don't judge me too hard. These are all events that happened to me personally. I swear I'm not crazy. My encounters with the unexplainable didn't start with a bang, but rather with a subtle, chilling whisper of presence that grew over the years. These earlier experiences all took place at my old home in South Carolina. It began back when I was much younger, just a typical teenager. My brother's friend and I had pulled an all-nighter playing Yahoo Pool on the computer. As the sun began to peek through the windows around 6 a.m, we finally decided to call it a night. My brother's friend crashed on the love seat, out cold almost instantly. I, on the other hand, stretched out on the larger couch, pulling a blanket over my face to block out the morning light. I was definitely awake, just trying to drift off when I heard it, a distinct creaking coming from my bathtub. I know my house inside and out. That tub only creaks when someone is actually in it, shifting their weight around. The creaking stopped, and then something else, something that made the hairs on my arms stand up. It sounded like somebody slowly dragging their bare feet across the floor, all the way from my bathroom to where my TV sat, a good 10 feet, maybe more. The dragging sound paused right by the TV, then, just as slowly, started dragging back towards the bathroom, and then complete silence. I was wide awake under that blanket, my heart pounding, trying to comprehend what I had just heard. There was absolutely no one else awake in the house. Years passed, and the oddities continued. One evening, the inexplicable became undeniable, and I wasn't alone. I was walking a friend to the side door of my house, which leads out through the kitchen. As we turned the corner into the kitchen, we both froze in our tracks. Standing right in front of my refrigerator, clear as day, was a figure that looked exactly like a person wearing a fedora hat. It wasn't a shadow. It was a defined shape, solid and real. My friend and I simultaneously turned to each other, our eyes wide with shock. In perfect unison, we both blurted out, "Did you just see that?" In the couple of seconds it took for us to look at each other, to process the shared disbelief, we snapped our heads back to where the figure had been standing. It was gone, completely vanished. After this, another one of my friends came over and, bless his soul, went through my entire house, checking every room, every closet, making sure no one had actually broken in. There was no one. We had both seen it, and then it was just gone. My house, it turns out, has always had a strange energy. Over the years, there have been several unexplainable events building a compelling case for something unseen dwelling within its walls. One time I was in my mom's bedroom just talking with her. Suddenly, from upstairs in my room, we both heard the unmistakable sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. It sounded exactly like a clothes basket being pulled. What made it so unsettling was that I had no company over. My little brother was downstairs in his own room, and all the dogs were right there with me and my mum. There was no logical explanation for that sound. Immediately after hearing it, I went upstairs to my room, and sure enough, nothing was moved or out of place. It was completely undisturbed. It wasn't just me experiencing things either. My mom has her own unsettling experiences when I'm not home. She's told me multiple times that she frequently hears what she describes as someone jumping off my bed upstairs. It's a distinct, recurring sound she hears when the house should be empty. Perhaps the most compelling evidence I have, the kind that makes even skeptics pause, are the several EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, I've caught. These particular instances, unlike the others, happened at my dad's house in Ohio. One was entirely by accident. I was recording myself playing the guitar, and at the very end of the video, clear as a bell, you can hear what sounds like a woman saying, "Play it again." Another EVP is even more chilling because it was a direct response. I specifically asked out loud, "Is there somebody standing beside me?" And immediately, as clear as day, I captured a man's voice saying, "I'm watching you standing there." Next story, a ghost in the red church. Hello Darkness Prevails. I've started listening to your channel, and I became a fan ever since I love listening to scary stories even during work time. When I realized that I could submit my experience on this website, I decided I wanted to share my experience that has become one of my most memorable memories of my life. I still remember that moment to this day. This very first paranormal sighting happened when I was quite young, maybe about 13 years old, so bear with me for a bit as it's been more than a decade since that happened. During school vacation, my family and I head towards a very nice place, and since I can't really include the real place's name, I'll just describe it as best as I can. This city is one of the top historical sites in my country. It's known for its rich cultural tapestry influenced by Portuguese, Dutch,
and British colonial eras. We've been there a lot of times in the past.
And at the age of 13, my family made a very last visit to this city, which I have no idea will become one of the most memorable visits of my life. That day, we decided to take a walk around one of the tourist spots, the Red Square. The Red Square is a historical square in the old town area where there are many, many Dutch-inspired red buildings. We take a walk around as the square is filled with the bustling noises of the vendors selling their toys and bubble wands for kids, the smell of delicious street food, and tourists busy taking pictures of themselves and the red buildings. At that time, I was quite a mischievous kid, and I tended to separate from my family and wander off without telling them. This time is no exception either, as a building caught my attention. It was a red church. I don't know much about architecture and stuff, but it is indeed a beautiful building that I just couldn't take my eyes off of it. So much so that I had no idea that I got separated from my family again. I stood there, silently admiring the church, until something caught my eye. There, at the very front entrance of the church, was a woman. Well, I think she's a woman because she has very long black hair, but I couldn't see her face because her face was covered by her hair, which was strange enough as it is. But my 13-year-old brain didn't think much about it. She was wearing a pure white dress with long sleeves, and at that time all I thought was, is she not hot in that thick dress in such hot weather? People are passing by the church entrance once in a while, but strangely enough, nobody seemed to notice her but me. I just keep staring, and I didn't know if she was staring at me back, but I could definitely feel a chill gaze beneath her hair. Then suddenly, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I was so focused on staring at that woman that I jumped a bit from the interruption. I turned around to see my brother standing behind me, who told me that he and my parents were looking for me and why I had run off again. I didn't answer and simply pointed at the red church. "Did you see that woman?" I asked. My brother, confused, looked at the red church where I was pointing at and shook his head. "What woman?" I froze, and when I looked back at the church, the woman was gone.
I didn't know if that
Woman was an actual ghost or just a woman who...
likes to dress up since quite...
A few locals are dressing in historical costumes, or some have pythons wrapped around their necks so tourists could take pictures of them for money. But I did not look back at the church and drag my brother back to where my parents are waiting for me. That night, as we returned to our hotel, I had a strange dream. It has been years since then, but I could still vaguely remember that I was dreaming about a woman, the very same woman at the red church. Still has long black hair covering her face and is wearing a thick white dress with long sleeves. She did nothing but stand a few feet away from me, just stared at me beneath her hair. And I stared back. I couldn't remember anything else other than me and her just keep staring at each other, as if we are having a staring competition. The next day, when we went back to the square to buy some snacks to bring them back home,
I didn't see the woman at the red church again.
However, as we stayed for another night at our hotel, I dreamt of her again. But this time, I couldn't help but notice she was standing closer to me than from the previous dream, almost an arm's length away from me, and she could easily touch my shoulder if she raised her hand. That freaked me out a little, but I couldn't wake up no matter how hard I tried until the next morning. Strangely, but fortunately enough, nothing happened to me other than we stared at each other again. Thankfully, we left on the third day of our vacation, and we never returned to that city, nor did I have a dream about her again as soon as we left. Because of that, I just brushed it off as nothing but a nightmare created by my imagination. However, a few months later, my uncle and his family came to visit us from another country. He's a funny and kind guy who always loves to cook, as he enjoys it immensely. Before I get to his part of the story, I need to tell you a little bit about my uncle. My mother once told me that my uncle can actually see ghosts. When he was a kid, he saw them a few times. But when he grew up, becoming a Christian like my family, and married to a kind woman who is my aunt, he rarely saw them again. Getting back to the story, my uncle and his family went to the same city with the Red Square tourist spot that I visited a few months ago, wanting to tour around the entire city and try out some popular restaurants there. A few days later, when he and his family came back to my house from their trip,
I couldn't help but notice that he looked pale. He looked kind of afraid and didn't even talk to me.
He just went back to the guest room and locked himself in until the next day, when he and his family returned to his country. After a while, when my family and I visit my uncle's country for a vacation, we stay at my grandparents' house. I asked my aunt when she came visiting, "A few months ago, when you and your family returned from the city, why is Uncle acting so weird?" My aunt, who loves to smile all the time, suddenly didn't smile anymore. She looked worried, and then she whispered to me, "Your uncle told me that he saw a woman at the Red Church, and he got spooked ever since. He kept having nightmares about her until the day we left the city. That was when I knew that the woman I saw wasn't just a fig of my imagination. My uncle saw her too, and I am so glad that I never returned to that place ever again." Next story, I don't know what it is. For context, I have a big family. Just 2 years ago, it became a family of 8. We live in a small apartment with only 2 small bedrooms. I share a room with my older sister, my younger sister that is only 1 year younger than me, and my younger brother. We have bunk beds. My younger sister has been sleeping in my bed with me because she saw a roach on her bed. Our apartment is infested with huge roaches. In our room, there is a small closet. In the closet, on the ceiling, there is a sort of door to go up, I guess. We've never been able to go up there, but I always see it slightly opened. The closet is really full, so the only way I can close it is with a hair tie tied on the doorknobs. This will become important later in the story. I'm currently a junior in high school, but when I was in 7th grade, I was sitting in the living room. The door to my room is right next to the living room. I swear, I saw a head. It was like it was crawling on the ceiling, because its head was upside down. This thing, it had no face, but I could see where its eyes and mouth were meant to be. It had dents where his eyes were supposed. I blinked and it was gone. I told my family, but they said it was just my imagination. My mom said it was from all of the scary movies I've watched. A few months after that, I walked past the bathroom, which I hate passing by when the lights in there are off because it feels like someone's watching me. When I walked past it, the lights were off, but on the door, I saw long, sharp fingernails and a face peeking. I decided to ignore it because it really frightened me. After that, every time I do the dishes, I hear footsteps behind me and see figures in the corner of my eye, but that was all until a couple of months ago. I was taking a shower and my shoes were just outside of the shower. I never close the shower curtains because I feel like there is someone on the other side. I was rinsing my hair when I saw something move. It was my right shoe.
I thought maybe it didn't move and I had just imagined it.
But it moved again. I pretended not to notice it because I was scared.
I finished showering and ran out the bathroom.
A few months after that, I was sleeping on my bed and had a dream. I dreamt I was on my bed and my younger sister was laying there too, but her feet were on top of mine for some weird reason. But then I noticed there was a third pair of legs on my bed. I told my sister and we both freaked out. Me moved to the opposite side of where these legs were coming from, which was under my bed, and we saw a hand reach out to try and grab us. The hand had long fingers and long fingernails. It was trying to grab us as it was getting closer to us. I heard my mom calling me. I later woke up to my mom calling me. She asked me if I wanted crêpe. I was shaking with fear, but I guess she didn't notice it, since she just waited for an answer. I nodded my head, yes, and she left. For some reason, every night since then I've noticed the hair tie I've been using to keep the closet doors closed has just been hanging on one of the doorknobs, leaving the closet open.
Every time I close it, I always end up seeing it open the next time I see it. I've asked every possible person that could open that closet, but they always say no, and I know they weren't lying.
I don't know if it's living up there, but it's really creepy. But I have another story. My younger sister told me that she had fallen asleep on my bed with her headphones on and her phone still on. She said that she woke up, but pretended to still be asleep when she felt me take her headphones off and turn her phone off and put to charge. She opened her eyes when she heard me walk away. So that's how she knew it was me, but it wasn't me. She didn't know it wasn't me. A week later, she told me that. And I told her it wasn't me. She didn't believe me, but I know she wanted to believe me, even if it meant that she had an interaction with that thing without even knowing it.
A few days after she told me about that, I woke up at 3 in the morning. I saw something tall with a human-like form. It was crouched over, just staring at me, watching me sleep, but it didn't have a face.
When it saw I had woken up, it simply stood up and just walked away. I'm not sure if that was just my older sister and I had just imagined what I saw, but I was terrified.
I fell back asleep 2 hours later.
I often find a lot of my things missing. Sometimes they aren't where I left them, sometimes I never find them. I don't know if that thing is here to hurt me and my family, or if it just made my home its home at night, but I've lived in that apartment my whole life. I'm currently writing this at school because I'm scared of what that thing could do to me. I always feel like it's watching me. If I turn a corner, I'm afraid it might get me.
Next story, cowboy creature. I've had brushes with the paranormal before.
Sleep paralysis, that heavy feeling of being watched. Even what I thought were ghosts when I was a kid. But nothing in my life comes close to what happened after me. My brothers and a close friend moved into an old 7-bedroom house tucked away in the woods. I'm 22 now, and at the time I lived with my 3 brothers, Malik, 20, Adrian, 19, and Jalen, 16, along with my friend Cameron, 20. We'd all been struggling before that. Me and Malik were crammed into a 1-bedroom suite that ran us $1,300 a month, while Cameron was still with his parents. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't sustainable either. One night, me and Malik were drinking with Cameron's dad, let's call him Paul, and mentioned how tired we were of our living situation. Paul said his co-worker, Ray, had a spare house on his property. He didn't need the money, but he wanted people living there to keep it up. When we first saw it, we were caught off guard. It had 7 bedrooms, but it was filthy. There were snakes, toads, and way too many wasps for comfort. Ray told us if we got it cleaned, we could live there for $600 a month. Considering what people charge just for a single room, it was the deal of the century. We put in the work, got it fixed up, and moved in. That's when the strange things began. One evening, I was over at Cameron's parents' house with him and Jalen. His mum, Mrs. Turner, was trying to convince him to look into college. She thought maybe if I was there to back her up, he'd listen. I tried, but his stubbornness rivaled a mule's. We were laughing and talking over food when my phone rang. It was Malik, and he sounded shaken. He asked if we were outside the living room window. I said no, we were still at Mrs. Turner's. His voice dropped. There's a man outside the window staring in. He's wearing a red flannel cowboy hat.
He has no face. That alone made my stomach turn.
My phone had been on speaker, so Cameron and Jalen heard every word. We quickly said goodbye to Mrs. Turner, piled into my car, and drove back. No one was hurt, and no windows or doors were touched, but Malik pointed out the tree near the living room window, the one we never cut down even though it threatened to break into the roof. He swore the man had been standing there. We checked the ground under the grass, the dirt, even the path toward the road. Nothing. Not a footprint. We tried to forget about it. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Cameron and Jalen had gone to Walmart late at night for snacks and bathroom supplies, leaving me, Malik, and Adrian at home. About an hour later, the front door slammed and they rushed in, pale as sheets, the bags of groceries left scattered outside. They said when they pulled into the driveway, they saw a man peering through the living room window. Too dark to see details, Cameron turned on his flashlight. That's when they both froze. The figure was already facing them. Red flannel cowboy hat, no face. Except this time, there were 2 glowing yellow lights where its eyes should have been. They said it looked like it had been caught in the act. Then their lights went out, and they bolted. At this point,
I had 3 eyewitnesses, Malik first.
Now Cameron and Jalen. I was starting to believe something might be out there, but I still wasn't fully convinced. Cameron and my brothers weren't waiting, though. They grabbed kitchen knives and went outside to confront it. I stayed behind, honestly thinking the whole thing was getting out of hand.
I just wanted to eat and watch YouTube, not chase shadows.
But minutes later, the front door burst open again. They stumbled in, out of breath. They said they'd gone around the house, then toward the road. That's when they saw someone standing there perfectly still. When they tried to get closer, the figure suddenly dropped to all fours. They panicked and ran. That did it. This time I went too.
All 5 of us stepped into the night, each clutching knives we knew wouldn't help.
We walked the property, then down the road. Nothing. I was about to turn back when I saw it. Across the road, standing just beyond the tree line, was a dark silhouette.
Enormous, 8 or 9 feet tall.
Too far to make out details, but I'll never forget the stillness. It was worse than movement. A mannequin sways, a scarecrow shifts in the wind, but this thing stood with an unnatural, suffocating stillness. We started toward it. Then it dropped onto all fours, not like a man crouching, like a spider. Its chest seemed to scrape the dirt as it scuttled forward, its limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. My stomach turned, and all of us froze. That's when headlights swung around the bend. The creature jerked its head backward without moving its body, like a turtle craning its neck. The truck screeched to a stop, and the driver's door opened. It was Ray. Without a word, he pulled out a rifle and started firing. The thing bolted into the field, vanishing into tall grass and the old sheds nearby. Ray swore it had to be a crackhead, but the look on his face told me even he didn't believe it. He handed out rifles, one to me, one to Cameron, and told us to help search. We didn't dare split up. We called out, threatened to call the cops, swept the fields for nearly 2 hours. Nothing. The police later took our statements and brushed it off as a vagrant. But I can still see the way it moved, the way it dropped and crawled with its body against the earth like something not bound by bones. It's been 3 months since that night.
We haven't seen the faceless cowboy again.
But sometimes when I pass the living room window, I feel it, that heavy certainty that something is still out there, watching from the tree line. Next story, Creepo in my bedroom. I want to start off by saying I am a Christian. I don't believe all those cryptids.
That was until this happened. I'm 15 now. This occurred 8 or 9 years ago, I'm not sure. But here we go. It was a regular day. Went to school, came home, had dinner, went to bed.
It one of these days that something changed. The air in my bedroom felt cold and heavy. I was young and stupid, so I didn't think much of it. This was the Australian winter in NSW, so this was usually normal until I fell asleep.
I woke up a couple hours later feeling
Watched. Then again, my sister would hide stuff she had taken from my parents. So I was used to that happening, but then I heard it. This blood-curdling scream, it sounded like my mum, so I ran to her room, but she was fast asleep, so I went back to bed.
Again, I was young, so seeing my mother asleep was just some confirmation. I was just tired. The night playing tricks on me.
I went back to bed, but found our dog Dead Eyes gorged out lying on my bed. I screamed, but nothing came out. Unlike most of the stories you hear, I was able to move. I rubbed my eyes, and it was gone. Now that shook me to my core, and I left my light on for the rest of the night.
I kept my light on for the next few weeks. I didn't experience those,
whatever you want to call them again, but the cold and heavy feeling remained. But then fast forward a couple months later, I had forgotten about that event and could sleep with the light off, but little did I know, this night would be the worst of them all.
Normal day school home dinner bed, but this time, when I walked into my room, it was freezing cold. I could see icicles on my desk and shelf. Again, I rubbed my eyes and I was gone.
Again, I shrugged it off and went to bed. Couple hours later, woke up to a whispering sound coming from under my bed. I looked down, but for the first time ever, I see nothing in my room. I rise back into bed to see this towering figure looming over me. Its face is hooded with some black flaming type of cloth. It is holding something, staff made of what looks like finger bones, human finger bones.
I scream this time. A small squeak comes out the thing, jerks back the moonlight, giving me a glimpse of its face. It looks like flesh is falling or peeling of its skull. It has no eyes, just a pit of blackness.
And it just fades into nothing. Shaken by this, I force my eyes shut, covering myself with all my blankets. and then I fall asleep. Ever since then, I had never had anything like that happen, just these small whispers coming from under me. Fast forward, a few years later, these small, strange nights have still haunted me, still under my bed. We were moving houses. The first night there was pure bliss. Nothing happened. And nothing has happened since then. I don't know what it was, but my theory is that a spirit or demon had claimed that house as its own, and it was not happy about our presence.
If anyone can tell me what type of creature this is, it would be gratefully welcome. But I know one thing, something I seems like an entity wants you to leave.
You should leave. Next story, possessed toy that stared at me while I slept. A quick side note before I begin. I'm so happy with my previous sharing, Father and Son Lake UFO, that I decided to share my second event, something that is brutal to my psyche even now. So let me explain. This is my most frightening encounter, and my third ever. This happened at the same place and age as in my previous story, but is somewhat short.
And that's all you need to know going into this. Let's begin. When I was 8, my aunt came over for my birthday and brought me a small stuffed dog toy.
This was ordinary, as she would always bring over something along the lines of toy, stuffed, random, useless, which the dog toy fit in the lines nicely. So, at the age of 8, I didn't really want the toy, but I accepted it like a normal child would, hamming it up and thanking my aunt for the gift. At the time, I put the toy on my desk, which is across from where my bed was at the time. The toy would face me as I slept, just sitting there as I liked it to be. Now the toy itself's description, the outer parts of the toy were pretty basic, a toy dog. But the inside was only composed of plush, no wire or anything else inside. Also, the toy had hair around its eyes, not going into or in any direction around it, but trimmed so its eyes were fully visible. As I got older, the dog would sit and watch me grow over the years, until I reached the age of 12 and decided,
hey, let's rearrange this place.
And the only major change was that my bed was beside the desk that the toy sat on. So for about a month I slept there, but one night something changed. It was like something had flipped a switch. The dog that once had been ignored on the desk for the first time in 4 years gained my attention. I remember walking in my room the first day, and halfway through the room, I stopped. There was this sense of dread that came over me as I stood there.
I turned and saw the toy.
It was looking as it always did, in the same direction as always, but something was different. I leaned in closer and looked at it, not touching it, but examining it thoroughly.
I saw nothing different, and I was about to leave, but as I leaned away, I saw it.
Its eyes were almost completely clogged out by hair. The same hair that was somehow longer than the rest of its hair. But when I first got it, and as I mentioned earlier, the hair was, originally, shorter than the rest. I pulled away, freaked out by this weird growth in a children's toy, and left the room. This memory would linger in my mind, occurring mostly late at night, until the main event occurred. This happened about a week after the hair growth in the toy occurred. I went to bed and fell asleep after about 30 minutes. I was insomniac at the time, so this was amazing timing for me. But around 2 in the morning, I woke up. I wasn't startled awake or anything, it was just like I woke up early. As I turned over in my bed to check my phone for what time it was, as I said, it was 2. I saw the toy dog on my shelf, but this time was different than all the other times I had seen it. Its body was facing the wall where my bed used to be, but its head was turned around a good 90 degrees and down to face my head where I was now. Its shaggy, overgrown eyes gave it this strange look that should never be affiliated with a children's toy. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. I froze in place, scared to move away from this strange
thing? Toy? It? I don't know what to call the thing.
For about 3 weeks I was so scared that I didn't touch it, and it sat there, staring at my bed with its unnatural hair growth and twisted head until I had had enough. I walked into my room and stood in front of it for 2 full minutes before grabbing its neck and twisting it away from me. It bounced back into its natural, good position once again, like it had never happened. This memory will haunt me forever. And I don't know what that thing was or who it was, but it did not like me having it. Or maybe it just wanted attention.
I don't know. I still have the toy dog and its hair still seems to get longer and longer.
Every time I look at it, I know it's an odd place for me to put this account, but I will be putting this in Mysterious Creatures because as it was possessed, it would have felt different. I've seen possession type things and I think this will fit more nicely here. Next story, The Glowing Hours. I'm going to start by telling that I have always believed in the supernatural, and through my childhood, I have seen unexplained things that can sometimes be considered hauntings. But what happened to me during the summer of 2014 is the definition of supernatural activity. I was in my second year of high school and was enjoying the last time left of our summer vacation, which in Sweden is 10 weeks long, so I landed in that state when you actually miss school, friends and such. I have been sleeping oddly bad for a teenager, especially on a holiday. But it wasn't just getting enough shut-eyes. No, the peculiar was the pattern. I would go to bed around 11:12 p.m. and wake up 3 times during the night. First time 03:15, next time 06:25, and finally 09:55, 5 minutes before my alarm. This happened to me around 2 to 3 weeks, and of course it bugged me. I tried everything in my power to figure out what was causing these odd sleep pattern. I tried setting my alarm to just before I would wake up, but I would always wake up at the same time, 03:15, 06:25 and 09:55. I tried going to bed later and earlier. I even tried to stay up the whole night.
Nothing worked. The oddest thing, though, wasn't that I, for some unexplained reason, woke up these odd hours. No, it was the feeling right after when I opened my eyes.
The feeling of total defenselessness, like I was a wounded deer surrounded by a pack of wolves that crept closer and closer with every breath I took. This feeling of being completely defenseless mixed with a feeling of shame, like I stood naked in front of millions of people and they saw through me every last thing. My secrets, my flaws, all my little awkward and ashamed moments, thoughts and feelings. That feeling was the strangest. The mixture of defenseless and shame all piled up in my stomach, but only for a few microseconds before my eyes adjusted to the dark. Then it was gone like it never happened. I would have just discarded that feeling, but it happens all the time I woke up. I tried to speak with my father about it, but he who'd always been a critic of everything.
He just assumed it was because of me sleeping when I shouldn't and stuff like that.
And I actually went with it because if you are in a situation when weird things happen, unexplainable things even, then the mind reaches for the reasonable explanation. Why live in a world full of danger and fear when you can live in one where everything is great? Oddly, after that little chat with my dad, it stopped. I didn't wake up in the middle of the night, nor felt the same mixture of feelings again, and actually went with the explanation that I was just sleeping weird or something. This kept on going for a few days until he happened. I remember the day perfectly like it's been wedged in my mind. It was an ordinary day the day before me. My twin brother and some few friends were going to the city for a few days in some Orthodox camp where there would be a lot of speakers talking about all sorts of things. So with the weather being nice, we decided to head there and receive some new knowledge. We would leave early the next day, and I, who have never been able to sleep in a car, thought a good night's rest would help me along, and went to bed around 9 p.m. I remember falling asleep quite early and thought to myself how great all this is going to be. That was before I woke up. The sweat was dripping from my back, my head was pounding like my brain was trying to break through my skull. And that damn feeling again, defenselessness and shame, but now also the feeling of being watched, like the walls was staring at me. I have been sleeping fine for days now, and this decided to happen now. I was thinking this as I opened my eyes and automatically drew my view to the door.
Someone was standing in front of my door with their back against me.
A weird bluish glow was illuminating the room, and the person was thin, real thin. They weren't wearing a shirt nor shoes, just a pair of worn grey sweatpants. Their back was bent, and I could see the spine and vertebrae almost piercing through the skin. The person was just standing there staring into the door. In my sleepy state, I lifted my head from my pillow and said, "Hey, get out of here!" Then they turned to me, and I saw that it was a man, an old man. His face was pale with eyes tired and blank. The top of his head had this bald spot, but other than that, his head was covered in long-grown hair. His arms that were hanging by his sides were as thin as the rest of him. He looked at me, but more as a blind man looked at one. Our eyes lock on for a few seconds before he gently turns around and vanishes. I don't know if he opened the door or went through it, he just vanished, and with him the weird bluish gloom. I dropped my head on the pillow and closed my eyes. I don't know if I woke up or simply just opened my eyes, but I flew up in my bed and yelled out into the darkness. What the fuck was that?
I couldn't fall asleep after that. I didn't want to either.
I just sat staring at the door the rest of the night. Fast forward to the day we arrived at the camp. It was the evening after, and we checked into the hotel we were going to spend our nights in. We got 3 rooms, one for me and my brother. The biggest, actually. It had a huge twin bed in the middle of the room facing the window, and the bathroom was big too, shaped like a rectangle with the shower on the far end of the room. This is important because what happened before we were about to get something to eat. I decided to take a quick shower because I spent 6 hours inside of a car and the rest of the time in the hot sun. The shower was well needed, just what I needed to clear my head. Afterwards I did the usual. I dried myself, but that was when I realized the light in the bathroom wasn't on. It wasn't like it shut off and I was standing in complete darkness. No. I was staring at the light switch and it was turned off, but the room wasn't dark. In fact, it was glowing like a candle, but bluish. I turned around with the towel around my waist and he was there. Standing behind the half-open shower curtain, staring at me, he was standing behind it, peeking through, like a kid trying to scare someone. He did not talk. As you could realize, this really stressed me out in the end. I couldn't keep my eyes up for more than 5 minutes, but luckily, this was our last day here, and I would be in a car for the next 6 hours. Some rest was indeed needed. The ride home was uneventful, and we were home around 11 p.m. I got to bed almost immediately, and when I awoke, the sun was down, but my room wasn't dark.
No, it was blue. He, the man that has been haunting me and terrorizing me for the last couple of days, stood in my room, but not by the door. This time he was on my bed, staring down at me.
He was hunched over and stared right into my soul.
I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't do anything but stare into those damn eyes. I never experienced sleep paralysis before, but this was not far beyond that.
It felt like days before the sun peeked over the old barn roof, and the man finally decided it was enough and left me to my own fears. I told my mum about this a couple of days prior, and she, who also believes in the supernatural and experienced some unexplained things herself, stopped me afterwards and asked a very odd question. Was he tall? And did he have a scar on his left cheek? I was baffled by the question, but simply answered yes, remembering the scar. It crossed his jawline down to his left cheek. Her face turned white and she swallowed hard before she got up and came back with an old photo album. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking when she searched through it. She showed me a picture of an old man standing by a river. He was wearing a dark suit with far too short arms. Even through the thick fabric, I could see his bones sticking out through the shoulders. And that face, I could never forget that face, pale, tired, with a cold look in his eyes. She said he was her dad, my grandfather, who I never met. He killed himself. They found him hanging in the barn by one of the old wooden beams.
I don't know what he wants. I haven't seen him since that last time in my room. But I know by experience that if a ghost knows, you can see them.
If you interact with them, they never leave you because they know they can fuck with you. I don't feel like he's hanging over my shoulder or anything, but I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, staring at my door, waiting for him to stand there, staring back and starting this whole thing all over again. Next story, my haunted house. Hello after. Listening to your podcast I have decided I would like to share some of my experiences.
I give you my word that everything I am about to divulge is true.
It all takes place in the house that we are still living in, though on my part, reluctantly. Please feel free to edit if needed. Some background about me so you can get a feel of who I am. My name's Mary and I'm 37 years old. I'm married to the love of my life, who we can call Kirsty, and we have no children. We do have a small dog who we adore. Okay, so 7 years ago, we were finally in a good position financially and decided to purchase our first house together. After looking for a couple of months, we stumbled on an old, beautiful 3-bed that we both fell in love with instantly. We made an offer just under asking price and was elated when it was accepted. So we moved in and decorated, replaced the bathroom as it was a bit outdated, and had some work done on the garden. For the first couple of months, nothing happened and we were just so happy. We didn't have our current dog when we first moved in, but we did have my dog, a golden lab, who I had brought into the relationship. He was an old boy and struggled getting up the stairs, but apart from that, he also seemed to love the new house, though he did on occasion seem to be watching something in the kitchen
that we couldn't see. So the first thing to happen
was our kettle turned itself on. My wife was at work and I was working from home, sitting at my laptop on the kitchen table. Behind me, I heard the distinct sound of the kettle coming to the boil. I remember being absolutely perplexed. As I got up to check it out, I could see that indeed the kettle had been turned on and the little switch had been clicked down.
I didn't really know what to make of it, but at this point, I
wasn't thinking paranormal, I was thinking faulty kettle. Other small things began to happen around the house, like we would hear noises from other rooms that we struggled to figure out the cause of. Things would go missing and then turn up in other places. Strange smells would appear. Our dog would get startled for no reason and his hackles would go up on his back, a behavior that we hadn't seen him do before moving into the house. Around this time, I began to get a really heavy feeling of dread when in the house.
I felt like I was being watched. It still feels like this to this day. Things began to escalate rather quickly, and if I'm being honest, I was beginning to not like the house or being alone in it. I felt like I was in danger.
My wife also experienced all of these things, but she was a little bit more relaxed about it all. She would say that we have a ghost, but it's nothing to be afraid of, and tell me if I feel like
someone is there, I should just explain that I'm
afraid and ask them to leave. We had been living in the
house around 9 months when our
dog's knees began to fail and he had to be put to sleep.
As it was the kindest thing to do.
We both took it really hard and I fell into a depression. That's when the activity in the house became much worse. One evening, we were watching TV in bed and heard loud footsteps coming up the stairs. After panicking, we decided to both go and look, me with a baseball bat and my wife with a heavy ornament. I opened the bedroom door and turned the lights on, but no one was there. We were heading down the stairs to check all the doors were locked and that we didn't have an intruder when the lights went off on the stairs, though our bedroom light stayed on. We ran downstairs and turned the lights back on. All the doors and window were still shut and everything looked normal. After this incident, we got cameras installed throughout the house and an alarm system for the doors and windows. One day, a few weeks later, I was round my brother's house when I got a frantic phone call from my wife saying there was a man sitting on our back door steps and he appeared to be whittling wood. I checked the live camera feed on my phone and could see that there was no one on the steps. My wife was terrified, so me and my brother headed to my house while I kept my wife on the phone. As we pulled into the drive, my wife said the man just disappeared. Now at this point I was ready to sell the house, but my wife was adamant that we wouldn't be run out of our home and that the man she had seen was a ghost and we needed to find a way to live with him. She said he probably just wasn't happy with the changes we had made to the house and that things would calm down. Things didn't calm down though, they got much worse. Our bedroom door began to swing open regularly while we were watching TV of an evening. Lights would turn off, then turn back on. We would hear footsteps on the stairs and little things like that. One day I had gotten up in the morning and was heading downstairs when I heard a whisper in my ear.
I couldn't make out what was said, but I did feel breath on my ear.
This was the final straw, and we decided we needed to get someone to come round and help us with what we were experiencing. We debated asking a priest, but as we were both not religious, we decided on a medium. We found a woman that came highly recommended and asked her to come to our home to tell us what was going on and also to help us get rid of what was in our house. She came round the following day, and when she walked in the front door, her face changed. She said she could feel a dark presence around me and also stated that there was a spirit still attached to the property. She said the spirit was just lost and meant no harm, but the dark presence that was attached to me was malevolent. This completely terrified me, and I wanted to stay in a hotel, but she informed me that it would probably follow me wherever I went, and I would be best to stay in the house, but show no fear as not to feed it. She said that by talking to it in the beginning we had given it power, and it was feeding of our fear. She said that she would help us, and so she said some prayers and saged the house and also saged both of us. She gave us some prayers we could say and also told us to get rid of the old grandfather clock that had come with the house, which we did. Everything felt much better when she left, and for a short time we thought she had gotten rid of the presence as nothing strange was happening anymore. This changed one evening when I was relaxing in the bath. I put my head under the water to rinse shampoo from my hair when I felt pressure on my shoulders and something pressing me underwater completely.
I could see that nothing was there as I was being held under the water. I was thrashing around and my wife ran into the bathroom.
As she ran in, the pressure disappeared and I flung myself out the bath, gasping for air and crying. This was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life, and at this point I knew that whatever was in the house didn't just want to scare us, it wanted to cause serious harm. Also, I had red finger marks on both of my shoulders. We tried to get the medium back round, but all of a sudden she was completely booked and said in no uncertain terms she wouldn't come back out. We got the feeling she was too scared to come back. We were terrified, and when one of us went in the bath, the other would sit on the toilet from this point forward. We both began to wake up with unexplained scratches and bruises. I would check the cameras, and as always, nothing was there, though we could see sometimes what looked like a faint cloud of black smoke that would just hang in an area and then disappear. I also witnessed doors opening on the camera a few times. We went to see the priest at our local church, and he agreed to come and bless our home. He came round and did his thing, and everything stopped for a whole year. We got back to being happy and started to put it all behind us.
We became comfortable in our home again and everything was good.
In that year, we also attended church on a weekly basis. One evening, we were sitting at the table eating our dinner when the kitchen door began to bang like someone was kicking it. I could clearly see through the window on the door that no one was there yet. The bottom of the door was bending in where it was being kicked so hard. We actually tried to kick the bottom of the door ourselves to compare, but even with my
hardest kick, we could not get the bottom to bend in.
Have also both witnesses our solid oak bookshelf that is built into the floor vibrate. The dog we have now is a miniature poodle and the sweetest boy. He will not stay anywhere in the house alone, and I refuse to leave him alone when we are out of the house because I'm afraid of what could happen to him. I actually had to find a new job that I could work from home all hours so he wouldn't need to be left alone. One evening a few weeks ago, I woke up to him cowering and whimpering under the bed we were sleeping on. I looked at the camera, and as clear as day, I could see him being pushed to the bed violently. We are now saving to move, though I fear we may be stuck in this house for a few months at least.
I can honestly say, living in this house has been terrifying, and I wish we hadn't moved in.
The activity seems to be ramping up since we decided to start saving to move like the presence knows we are leaving and wants to do as much harm as possible in the time we have left in this house. I didn't really believe in the paranormal before this house, but now I can say with absolute certainty that it's real. I am working as much overtime as possible so we can move sooner rather than later.
I feel a bit guilty about selling the house though, and have been at conflict with myself whether we should tell any
potential buyers about our experience or just keep quiet. Thank you for reading and keep up the amazing podcast.